Finally, the NFL schedule is here.
Thank God.
Yes, our
Thank
long
goodness.
crisis-awaited nightmare.
Yeah. You know what? But I got to give the NFL credit. Like, they're so
They made it a
amazing.
thing.
They made it a thing.
It's unbelievable.
They made it. It's unbelievable. Like, it's literally like just.
Where's the MLB schedule release day?
Right.
It doesn't happen.
Or the
you
NBA
just figure
schedule.
out.
Like,
Yeah.
it's legitimately a thing where they built this excitement around. Like, it's literally a calendar.
Yeah.
That's all it is. They're releasing a calendar. And, like, we all get so excited about it.
Yeah.
Like, I was, I'm like, I immediately checked out, okay, where are the Commanders playing? Like, is there a game I can get to?
Holiday games.
Yeah, 1,000. Holiday games. Okay, we got 2 games on Christmas.
Yeah.
And I also, obviously, the first thing I check is like, okay, what do we got on Sunday night? And I'm just like, do we have the best schedule? Yes, we have the best schedule. Okay,
we'll
good.
show that.
Our schedule is great this year.
Yeah, we'll
legit,
get there.
like that's, like I'm a company man, yeah, but legit great schedule.
Sunday Night Football is Sunday Night Football for a reason.
Oh,
Yep.
legit great schedule.
No more Zach Wilson in primetime either. We think for now.
Jets are in a
one
lot
Bo
of
Nix rolled
Yeah,
ankle
that's
away.
That's true.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe. We'll see.
Yeah, we'll see.
So,
We'll see. But anyway, there are a lot of nuggets from the schedule that do impact fantasy. Look, it's the middle of May, right? And so I think it's going to be, just in general, before we dive into the schedule, I think there are a couple of different implications. Number one is, I think, as you get into the draft, and we'll talk a lot about this more as we get into August, it's more tiebreakers and that kind of stuff. But I think one of the things you want to look at, just in general, as we sort of get our first look at this, is you see it here on your screen. Obviously, you want to do bye weeks. We're going to talk about that. But it's also important to know teams with long stretches of home or away games as well. Some late season bad weather games as you're trying to think about the fantasy playoffs, especially if you're doing best ball drafts right now and you want to do kind of that week 16, week 17 correlations, right? Are there teams that have a lot of dome games? Is that, like, we'll talk about Detroit. And, of course, teams on a short rest. I'm sure, Jay, you can talk to me about this, but, like, does that move the line when you know that there's a team traveling on a short week that, is halfway across the country and then they've got to play a Thursday night game?
Yep, absolutely it does. Short weeks impact the line. That can be worth a point to the spread. And then things like travel. Like, people always talk about what is home field advantage. Like, a big component of it is just how much you're traveling. The human body is not supposed to play NFL games after you've been on a plane for 7 hours, even with the way these guys travel now. So, like, we're going to look at strength of schedule. The Chargers have the second easiest strength of schedule. They also fly the most miles in the NFL, so it counts as that a little bit.
I was just going to say, the Chargers are by far flying the most miles in the NFL. And the other thing is, you also sort of, again, this is all nitpicky stuff, but it's true. They're going to play a very physical style of football this year under Jim Harbaugh. They're going to run the ball a ton. They're going to play very tough defense. Yeah. And so, again, you think about, you think about Gus Edwards and J.K. Dobbins and, each touching the ball 15 times a game because they're just running the hell out of the ball. And then now they've got to get on a 7-hour flight. Like, it just, that adds up. That's more wear and tear on players' bodies that are going to be playing, very tough football.
I think the really interesting one with the high number of dome games, Jay. You always talk about quarterbacks, that their success is also based on stable conditions. Maybe Kirk Cousins falls in line with that. Jared Goff is kind of the king of that.
Yep.
That's got to be another big factor as well.
Yeah, I think in a way, I think the biggest takeaway from the schedule, for me at least, it's the same one as last year, where it's just Detroit playing all these dome games. Like, end of last season, I don't think Jared Goff went outdoors once in his last 9 games last season. Now, this season, they only play 3 outdoor games all year.
It's crazy.
And that offense, like, Goff is the guy who has the biggest splits between what he does indoors and outdoors. And that's why I think that the Lions have a really high floor as a team. We're going to get into your wide receiver rankings, Matthew. I think there's a good chance Amon-Ra St. Brown is the number 1 wide receiver in football because he's playing in all these dome games. So I think it's very positive for Detroit.
It's unbelievable. I mean, and Sam Laporta is my number 1 tight end in fantasy as well. We're going to get into my rankings, not to spoil anything.
Yeah,
but
pass catcher
but my point is to your point about Goff, you're absolutely right. His home road splits are ridiculous. He just got paid in a big way. There's no concerns about job security for Jared Goff. The one bad thing about him is that, so while they only play 3 road games, they only play 3 games outdoors, you can see 2 of them come in week 16 and 17, the fantasy semifinals and semi-fantasy finals in most leagues. They are at the Bears in week 16, likely cold weather, and then at week 17, probably good weather, but still on the road at San Francisco, which we expect to be one of the best defenses in the NFL. So, I love Jared Goff could be a regular season fantasy MVP, but you may want to have an option as your number 2 quarterback as you get in there.
Yep. Also, just from
but Amon-Ra, but Jahmyr Gibbs, by the way, just think about Jahmyr Gibbs, right? Just his speed on the turf. He plays only 3 road games all year long. I mean, like, you suddenly get even more excited about Jahmyr Gibbs, about Amon-Ra. You know, we talk about Laporta. You know, could this help Jameson Williams finally break out?
That's the really intriguing one to me, because the opportunity will be there, and it feels like they could be a high-flying offense with Jameson Williams involved finally.
Yep. The thing that I look at most in terms of how the schedule is sequenced in terms of like win totals and who's going to win the Super Bowl, and we're going to talk about that a bit later, but I would always look historically at when Brady was on the Patriots. I'd always look at who plays the Patriots in the final week of the season, because that's when you want to play the Patriots, because they've already clinched the AFC East by then every single year. And you want to play, like, I think you'd rather play Baltimore towards the end of the season than in week 1, because Lamar Jackson's going to be there week 1. He may be more likely he's hurt towards the end of the season. And so with your Jets, Connor, which we'll get into in a little bit, the fact that they play all these rookie quarterbacks really early, I think is really good for them in particular. The fact that the schedule, even though it's a tough couple of opening games for them, I believe, it gets easier pretty quickly.
Yeah, you'd rather see those guys early, right?
Yeah.
And the Jets, an older team at some key areas, quarterback, both tackle spots, you feel like that's when they'll be at their best too, when those guys are healthy. So another big
just
factor.
to give you an example, just to your point about the Jets, right? Just look, the Jets are going to be a popular defense anyway. And week 1, they play at San Francisco. Not a great matchup.
Yeah, tough matchup.
But look at that. Week 2, at Will Levis. Week 3, they get Drake May. Week 4, they get rookie Bo Nix. Week 5, it's either Sam Darnold or J.J. McCarthy in London, right? It's not until Josh Allen at week 6 that you're nervous. But then, by the way, at week 7, it's either Russell Wilson or Justin Fields. And week 8, they get Drake May again. Like, there's in the first 8 weeks, there's 2 quarterbacks that scare you.
And they were really good against Josh Allen in their home game last year, and they destroyed C.J. Stroud at MetLife last year. So you're right. The Jets' defense, the value is going to be fascinating how they're viewed.
Yeah, I mean,
how early you take them.
Especially because you get out to a hot start there with them as well, right?
Handy not playing the Dolphins either till week 14. I think they are, one of those good teams who may not have anything to play for in week 18. They may. Tyreek Hill also seems to get hurt by week 14 every single season.
Yep. Teron Armstead.
Yep. The Dolphins, by the way, and I don't know if we have the Dolphins schedule up. The Dolphins, I think, is really I think he can knock Tua a spot or 2. And just, again, we love the Dolphins offense for fantasy football. It's going to be filled with, fantasy goodness. But look at how they end the season. So you mentioned that the Jets in week 14, right? So they play the Jets. The game's in Miami, but they're playing the Jets in week 14. Week 15, they're at Houston. We expect the Texans defense to be pretty good this year and, to be improved. Week 16, they're home against the 49ers. Again, really tough 49ers defense. Week 17, they're at Cleveland. And if you're in a fantasy league that plays it up to week 18, they're at the Jets in week 18. So the last 2 games of the season on the road, cold weather. We've seen, Tua has struggled in cold weather. So at Cleveland and at the Jets in 17 and 18. But just honestly, starting in week 14 all the way through the fantasy playoffs, they don't have one easy defense.
Think of the wind in those 2 places, Cleveland and, of course, MetLife Stadium. Those are awful places for Miami to travel to close out the season.
I'm still scarred from betting on Tua in that Kansas City playoff game and seeing him being out. I know that was a unique game. Like, conditions aren't going to be like that every cold weather game, but he just couldn't do anything in there, and he's someone you'd much rather be at home.
One other little schedule quirk that I sort of noticed here, which is kind of interesting. So you talk about weeks 15, 16, and 17, right? Obviously, the fantasy playoffs in almost every league. The Raiders, which aren't a sexy team, no one's going to like the Raiders, but the Raiders play 3 consecutive dome games, week 15, 16, and 17. And so we're going to talk a little bit later about Devontae Adams, but I just, whether it's Zamir White, whether it's, Adams or Jacoby Myers, or just, I don't know, I thought that was pretty interesting that during the fantasy playoffs, the Raiders have this, a really good, dome schedule, as it were, there in the fantasy playoffs. Hey, it's Matthew Berry from NBCSports.com and Rotoworld.com, and I want to thank you so much for watching whatever it is you just watched, or if nothing else, being too lazy to click out of the autoplay after this video started, after whatever it is you actually wanted to watch finished. But now that you're here, I'd like to take a moment here to ask you respectfully now, okay? I'm asking you respectfully to subscribe to the NFL on NBC YouTube channel. You'll get the latest Roto-World fantasy news headlines, all sorts of great shows, including my own Fantasy Football Happy Hour. So go subscribe now. Again, I'm asking respectfully.